hosted by LuminaData. And this series is really for professionals and leaders in finance. And we want you to learn from the industry peers in terms of what they learn in navigating the future of work. And really, the future is here, and we want to allow these industry leaders to share with you what they're experiencing in terms of how they disrupt their finance operation. So, with that, I am Rose Hiu. I go by Rose Hiu. I'm the CMO of LuminaData, and I will kick it off and let Afrozy introduce herself as the CEO of LuminaData.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining. I'm Afrozy Ara, CEO of LuminaData, and we are building agentic coworkers for finance operations. And my background is in consulting. I worked in consulting for many years, and there we saw the problem around disconnected data and systems, and that's why we are building LuminaData, which is a agentic coworker for finance teams. Super glad to be there in this conversation with the future of work with Greg in here along with Rose.
Thank you, Afrozy. And without further ado, I'm going to let Greg Moser, the CEO of ShipCalm.com, to introduce himself. And we can also hear from you, Greg, your journey with your famous 9 spreadsheet problem.
Yeah, hi everybody. Thank you all for joining us here for this conversation. I'm really excited to be a part of it. So I'm Greg Moser. I'm the CEO and co-founder of ShipCalm, and ShipCalm is an operations platform for emerging consumer brands. So we help emerging consumer brands, like the kinds of companies that probably stalk you in your Instagram feeds and try to sell you handbags and shoes and hats and all of that kind of stuff. Those are our customers, and we help run their operations, so warehousing, logistics, supply chain management, call center operations, the whole gamut of those things. And I've been fortunate enough to be working at this company since 2017. When it was founded, and it's been a treat. I get to work with entrepreneurs all day, every day, and that's really a lot of fun for me. But the business is certainly rich with data and transactions, and we have certainly encountered some challenges in aggregating information and putting in financial systems to support these things. Over the sort of my tenure at ShipCalm, I wore the hat of both CTO and CFO historically here. So I've tried to sort of solve these problems head on myself with varied degrees of success. We now have full-time CTO and CFO, so I was able to take those hats off, but I'm very familiar with some of the challenges. And Rose, you mentioned a little bit. We certainly have had challenges reconciling data from a lot of different vendors, and I think that's the 9 spreadsheet problem you're referring to, Rose. Is that right?
Yes, that's right.
That's how we met when Greg met us, and he said, "Hey, I know what you guys are solving for, and I have this big 9 spreadsheet problem working with data across various carriers." So yeah, Greg, I think maybe you can also tell us about what were some of the reasons why you thought, that's like a problem that you would want to solve, and how did it become a high priority for you, Greg?
Yeah, it's a great question. ShipCom is a really big adopter of AI. Have been since, we have been pre-LLM, right? Using predictive AI and all sorts of other machine learning models and things of that nature. And so one of the areas though that we found where we used a lot of AI in sort of call center activities and looking up information or providing chatbot functionality or whatever the kind of typical or predictive analytics to know people's inventory levels. Those are all pretty well established patterns. We have never really applied AI in finance, and oftentimes that's because while I might be more willing to apply AI in finance, your typical accounting centric organizations are a little bit skeptical, right? They're very much T crossers, I dotters. I'm not going to turn this over to AI because I don't know that I trust it. And I would say our own CFO was even, potentially in that camp before we met you all and saw what you were doing. When I saw what the tool was doing and what you guys could do in a relatively quick period of time, I was immediately like, oh, I have the problem for this. Like I have an immediate problem. I probably have a dozen problems for this, but I have one in particular, and that problem is at the end of the day, we buy labels, shipping labels. Everybody on this call is familiar with the shipping label. If you've ever had anything delivered to your house before, the little label with the tracking number on it, right? So we buy those labels from carriers like UPS, FedEx, DHL. And actually, there's a whole host of about a dozen other that we buy those labels from. Some of them people may have heard of, some of them you may not. Uni and On Track and all of these other kind of regional carriers, LSO and all of this. And so we buy labels from a variety of different people. Then we turn around, we resell them to our customers, to the brands. So you can imagine a world where every day we're doing tens of thousands of transactions where we're buying a label on behalf of a brand, and then we have to turn around and charge that label back to one of our customers. We've got to match that up on the tracking number. And if there was any additional charges we didn't know about up front, we've got to reconcile all of this data going back and forth. And over the years, there have been some companies out there that have helped third-party logistics businesses such as ours to manage this reconciliation issue with a more traditional, I would say, technical solution, where they built a one-to-one sort of like, hey, this is how the file comes from UPS and this is how the file comes from FedEx. And we know exactly how to match this stuff up and tell you what the discrepancies are and what needs to be billed out to what customer, and really accelerate that for the finance team. And in fact, we've worked with some of these companies in the past. The challenge with it is that building those one-to-one kind of reconciliation tools take these companies a lot of time to build. So you go, you meet with them and you're like, okay, well, what do you support? They say, oh, we support FedEx and UPS, and we're right around the corner from getting DHL done. And we've been working on it for 9 months or a year or whatever it is, right? And it's like, okay, well, that's great. And what about these other 9 carriers I've got over here? Well, they're on a roadmap somewhere, maybe at some point. Okay, how long have you guys been in business for? Oh, we've been in business for 25 years. And you're still just doing FedEx and UPS. I just have a low trust that you're going to actually end up doing this. And when we met you all, I sort of said, hey, I've got this problem. Is this something that you guys think that you could do with the tool? And I would say our team was blown away by how quickly and how accurately we got results back, right? And was kind of like, wow, you just killed like an entire industry of software platforms out there. Because there's like a dozen of these, specific tools for our world. Each one of them is probably a $10 or $20 million business or whatever it is. And you guys just came in and basically rebuilt it all. And I don't even know, it was like a week. We got our first results back from you across everything. And so that was really cool to see and inspiring and sort of illuminating of where this industry is headed and where a problem can be solved sort of this quickly, and also done in a way that makes my CFO feel comfortable, because that's a huge part of this is they don't necessarily trust us tech folks sometimes when we solve problems. And so to really be able to show how the reconciliations were done, what the discrepancies came from, all the kind of working papers that you would get in a normal audit was this incredible versus, hey, it's just AI as a black box and it spits out an answer and you just have to kind of trust it. I would say finance very much takes a trust but verify approach to all of these things. And so that was a neat surprise.
That's great. Thank you, Greg. So, Afrozy, I want to ask you, from hearing from Greg, and since you had experiences consulting with many enterprises, right? Can you tell us more about, is this a common thing that you see even for the enterprises? Since you mentioned earlier about kind of disaggregated data, tell us more about what you observe.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So first off, Greg, thanks for the shout out. Means a lot to us. And I especially my co-founder, CTO Deepthi, will be so happy to hear this from you. Really appreciate the shout out. I think when we started the company, that was really the premise from which we started, because when we talk to CFOs and in my work in consulting, when you talk to these big leaders, especially on the finance side, the first problem they say is, hey, our data is a mess. And the second thing that they say, our process is a mess. Now, the reason why the process is the mess is because the data is a mess. And it's a mess because systems are not integrated. And, as you talked about the FedEx problem and onboarding more and more carriers, it's just hard to get IT involvement in getting the integrations together. And that's why you have this bunch of data which may be in systems but not integrated, so hence out of access. And then the other part of it is Data can be in your unstructured spreadsheets, can be in PDFs, inside a folder. And then you have all of these systems, and there are humans who are the glue between the systems. And the intermediate tool that they use is the Excel spreadsheet to really glue between the systems. So that was our unique insight when we started the company, is that if you are able to bring in intelligence in that connecting layer between these systems, then you're able to solve for the data problem. But then as you solve for the data problem, you also solve for the process problem, because the bad process exists because data is not connected and data is not linked to each other. So that was the starting point of when we heard this, and we have seen in our experience. And we are now at an inflection point where technology can take us there with intelligent agents. So that was really the genesis of, how we kind of designed the product to look at the patterns around disconnected data. How you can, if we think from a perspective of a coworker that thinks like a human. So when the disconnected data is there, and there's a person who is a glue between the systems, the way that person thinks, so they understand a reconciliation problem, they know how to process that problem. So bringing in that intelligence into that connecting layer and then plugging into the data, I think that was kind of like one of the ways in which we looked at the framing of this problem, and we were able to kind of solve it or start around reconciliation as a key use case.
Can I just double click on something you said
Yeah, sure.
that I think is really important, Frozy? I think this point of data being unorganized is such an incredibly important one, and the amount of technical resources required to kind of wrangle the data, right? Like you find yourself in this world where finance teams are like, we can only get this done once the tech team does whatever they need to do to give us some data. I had this incredible experience where in the first quarter of this year, we do quarterly, strategic planning sessions at our company. And, I was talking to our CTO about what exactly the technology team can actually produce. And it was like feeling relatively limited. Really went into a deep dive, like, what are you spending your time on? Every week I'm involved with finance on billing and how to get this, and what do we do with this exception, and how do I make sense of it or whatever. And I really underappreciated how much tech resource goes into supporting finance teams, and then how much the speed of the finance team is hindered by that. And interestingly, we just had another quarterly offsite, and we go around and we ask everybody, like, what was your big, win from the last quarter? Like, what's going well? And my CTO was like, I haven't been involved in billing at all for the last quarter, right? And it was this like epiphany moment for me to be like, this isn't just about saving finance teams time and energy. It's actually about saving technical teams time and energy. And that is often, and they're like one of the most valuable assets. These are the people that, we pay the highest salaries to do this work. And that was like an unexpected, pleasant upside, and it wasn't 100% just due to our engagement, but I would say a big part of it was due to our engagement. And, but more importantly, just leaning into this kind of future of finance and being a little bit more self-serving with AI agents, where really that's how a finance team kind of wants to interact with a technology, is through an AI, the equivalent of an AI agent, and probably a lot less painful than, Bob in the corner who never gets back to your emails or whatever it is, right? So anyway, it was really inspiring to see that relief from our technology team more so than the finance team even.
That's actually a good segue. Go ahead.
I was just kind of bouncing off what you said. Like, even in my work with large enterprise companies, I saw like millions being spent in just getting the data together in one place. And let's just build this one single source of truth. And then we'll build like so many use cases around it. And when we would ask, okay, what are the use cases? Okay, we'll figure out the use cases. The problem is we cannot think of the use cases because we don't have the data together. And by the time you spend those millions and you've gotten that beautiful, nice view of the data, either the data has become obsolete or the use cases are not relevant anymore, or there is another system to be integrated. And there you go. So it's like, we're always waiting. And I think it's time to stop waiting. And we decided, okay, we just need to stop waiting and just get started.
Yeah, that is actually very real. I mean, I came from enterprise background too. The notion of single source of truth is true for every function is nirvana, actually. But it does feel like it's a long term constantly. But that's a good segue. I think you mentioned about how much it's helping the tech team, right? But I think the notion of does AI really help? It's a mind shift also, especially you said, Greg, for finance team. I would love to understand a little bit more. How do you convince them to actually even do a pilot or try it and have a sense of understanding how they can validate that the result is good and real?
Well, I think that one of the things that's nice about AI is it really has changed the sort of demo game in a very prolific way. And what I mean by that is you used to have to convince a finance team that there was going to be some tool, and then you get on like an hour-long enterprise sales demo, and somebody walks you through a bunch of screens, and maybe those screens were important to you, maybe they weren't, whatever it is. One of the, if it's a tool that's designed and built well, it's the sort of thing where like in 3 to 5 minutes you should like be able to play with it and get immediate value out of it. And I think in a lot of ways it's actually in and of itself its own litmus test of like, is this thing really going to drive value for us? Because, I think the expectation that we should all have is much the same way like everybody got on ChatGPT when that first came out and was like,
Mhm.
I'm going to ask it a hard question. I'm going to
Mhm.
ask it something that only an expert in my field would know. And like in 3 minutes, you're like, wow, this thing is super impressive, right? It obviously delivers value. It can have a meaningful insight about things. Like I don't need a lot more proof because I just got it back in real time. And I think that that's going to be sort of an expectation now. If you're designing, whether you're a finance person, technology person, a software development company, whatever that is, and your expectation is, we're going to build some tool that's going to require training and a bunch of onboarding and all that. So it's going to basically be dead. So I think the key thing is, for me at least, was just being able to, in this case, upload a couple of spreadsheets and show immediate value, right? Of like, wow, that was great. Yeah, that takes so and so, 3 hours to do, and you just did it in like 3 minutes with very little kind of ramp and onboarding time. So it really, I do think, comes to the speed and the ability to try something for sort of free and deliver value immediately. And I think that that's what AI does, is it
Mhm.
shows that value very, very fast, because there's a lot less setup and all of those sorts of things. And I think that this is why it's already here, right? It's not about like, well, what's your strategy going to be next year? It's kind of like, how deep have you implemented? How much deeper can you go? How fast can you get there? Because this isn't just a theoretical thing
Mhm.
anymore, and part of the reason it's being adopted so quickly is because it's quick to pick up, it's quick to learn, it's quick to share, it's quick to show value. And so the barrier is just, I think, a psychological one. I spend more time with my team making sure that everybody feels comfortable going to, hey, our customer wants a root cause analysis report on why this issue went wrong. I'm like, okay, well, start by asking ChatGPT and then
Mhm.
go from there, right? And if that's not your first thought,
Mhm.
then like that's the problem. Is your first thought needs to be, how do I use an AI agent to do this?
Mhm.
Oh, I can use it immediately right here, right now. And so that's the only barrier. And certainly that's the biggest one, is just I have to remember to remind everybody else that our first step should be,
Mhm.
go and use an AI agent first versus spending any other time trying to figure it out kind of the old way.
That's really
Mhm.
good. Good suggestion there. Rosie, for those who are in this environment where they have a lot of heavy systems, right, that you
Mhm.
mentioned, and they're concerned that AI agents may actually not work with them, what would you say to them about that?
Yeah, and it is a valid concern for many of our customers, specifically on the finance operations space. So, like you mentioned, Greg, like the finance team not being very comfortable with using AI because it's like, for example, when I use ChatGPT today, I asked the same question 3 different ways and it gives me different answers, or this different times of the day or depending on what kind of mood it is in, it gives me a different answer. But in finance, there is always one right answer, the one and only right answer. So I think that is the big shift in terms of builders, for people who are building like us, that we have to think of these systems as not really AI systems. They are really like reliable systems, technology systems with intelligence layered in when and whenever required. Like, for example, if you take something like reconciliation. Now, the reconciliation rules are pretty fixed, but then I don't want to change the rules in every iteration. But the process of setting up the reconciliation, and then the process of the fuzzy matches, and the process of kind of the intelligence in the exception management. Now, those are some of the things that are the layers of intelligence that are needed for it to be an AI first system. So the way we build it is, we first build a software system with controls and say, hey, this is how it works. This is how the workflow will look like. We know how the user will think about it. So like to your point, like you upload the spreadsheet, the users like kind of looks at the spreadsheet, compares and matches, does some operations, then builds the rules. So we will leverage AI to do all of that, but we will do all of that within the controls. So do not use AI when AI is not needed. So while it is an AI first system, but we bring in AI with a lot of like deliberate thinking on where it will accelerate versus where it's going to confuse the user. So that's kind of like the big consideration. So while there is chat gpt and all of these other agents that are coming in and saying, hey, use us for your finance, I think those are the places where it'll be very hard to get mainstream adoption because accuracy, do you feel comfortable kind of taking these numbers to your board? I think that's one thing. And the other thing is the explainability of things. Like if I do a certain step of things, I need to know exactly why this happened, because in the end, I have this to be audit ready. It has to be SOX compliant. So those are some of the nuances. I think those are the questions that our customers have. We have to kind of think deliberately on the nuances of the system as we build it.
Yeah, I think that's very real, right? I think Deepti, our CTO, also talk about horizontal AI versus vertical AI, and that's where I think vertical AI can be trained and have a bit more controlled, essentially, for exactly the accuracy needed for finance team and a kind of a transparency as well. So there is though this question that I think, Greg, you are kind of alluding, maybe you face it with your team as well, is the elephant in the room about if we have AI, is that gonna basically eliminate my jobs? What's gonna happen with my job in the future? I don't know whether you face that and how would you address that yet, Greg?
Yeah, we face it all the time. I mean, we're also in a world of we work with physical products, and so things like robotics and computer vision AI and all of that has a big displacement role or a potential displacement role in that front. I think there are limited examples where technologies have come in and actually done exactly that. Like actually a lot of people just lost their jobs, right? Like fundamentally, like that's happened throughout the course of history where technology has come in and yeah, a lot of people have lost their jobs and have had to find new types of work because there just aren't as many people who need to hand plow a field anymore, right? Or whatever that work might be. But I would say that by and large, what ends up happening is those resources just get repurposed for something else. So what it really is about accelerating the rate with which you're growing your company. So I can promise you that every company you can go into, and this would be the exercise that we use and the exercise that I encourage anybody else to use when adopting AI or any new technology where it's this risk of people are going to lose their jobs because of this, is to go and say, what are the next 20 things you want to do? And almost every employee can write down a list of like, well, this is a wish list. If I had the time, if I had the bandwidth, I would go and work on this, or I would figure out how to do this thing, or I would figure out how to do that thing. And if you actually review that list with an employee, you're like, wow, those are great ideas. Those are great research projects for you to work on, or those are good new, platforms to roll out. Whatever is on that list, it guaranteed everybody has got I would get to this if I had more time. And so then it just becomes, well, great. That's why we're doing this, so that you can get to more things on the list. So I want you to be really intentional about how you review this new technology, because it better clear up enough time for you to go and do these other things on the list that you want to do and we all agree are good things to do. Can't just be, we bring in this new technology and it's an expense and it doesn't clear up more freedom or more bandwidth for you to do better, higher thinking sorts of things. And we really position it more of a career development sort of a opportunity to employees. It's like much better to be a thinker than just a button pusher, right? And so that's certainly some of the tactics we deploy, Rose.
That's really great. I think it helps with the psychological safety to actually think broader and bigger.
I think it creates.
What do you think?
I-
Yeah.
I would just love to add to that. I think that's an amazing articulation of how leaders can talk about AI in their organizations. Because I think once you understand that, we have limited resources and, all the capacity constraints that you have, this new technology will help you get rid of it. And then you have an imagination. I think that's a great way for people to feel comfortable that, yes, you bring in this tech and it's going to change the slope of what we do as an organization and also as an individual.
Great. Thank you. That wraps up 30 minutes. I think I want to open it up. If there's any questions from any attendees, you can submit it through the chat and we will take it as we go.
So while we are waiting for any questions that come up, so one key takeaway, I think maybe I'll just pass it around for all of us to talk about from you, Rose, and also from you, Greg. If there is one takeaway that you would want to give to our audience here, would love.
Yeah. Yeah. Interestingly, I don't know how this came up, but actually the idea of, AI, I think that a lot of technology teams right now are thinking to themselves, great, I just got done moving everything to the cloud. Now I've got to figure out how to implement AI everywhere in the company, and I'm already short on time. And so I think it can be seen as a yet another thing that technology departments need to learn how to do and coach their companies through. But I think that, just when I was reflecting back on the experience in my own organization, it's like, no, in this particular instance, AI is like liberation from these other departments that you're actually supporting on a week in, week out basis, where if you can get this over the hump, it could really actually liberate you in a new and a different way. And I think that's exciting and inspiring for technology teams.
Yeah, my key takeaway is, especially hearing from Greg and his real implementation experience, it's just, if you're not on the bandwagon, you're missing out on the impact. This is not the same with probably, what is it, 2 years ago or a year ago, where everyone was super concerned about the hallucination. But this is different. There are vertical AI pre-trained and very much addressing specific use cases, which I love to hear that it's so easy to use and it's actually liberating the technical team, which is, I think, amazing to hear that. I hope all the IT not feeling insecure, but actually feeling happy that there is a solution to get to the end results faster.
Yeah, same takeaway here. I think future of work is already here. Let's just take it. That's the opportunity. I think we have one question from the audience. How can AI give you a competitive advantage? Greg, question for you.
Oh man, how can't it? Look, I think that it's yeah, I'm going to answer this probably in the way that you don't want to hear. I would say it's more of a survival, to be honest. Like, I actually believe that it's kind of like saying, hey, 1980s, hey, how can using computers in your business give you a competitive advantage? Sure. The short-sighted view of that is like, well, in the next 2 to 3 years, like I could have this major leg up on my competitors or whatever. But I think the bigger point, at least for me as a leader, is more about there may be some short-term gains and abilities, but I would say by and large, whatever industry you're in is going to adopt this thing. And so it's really more about not being left behind, right? Not being the one company that's still doing everything on paper when everybody else has moved to computers, because you just won't survive. You just won't survive. So it's more of a necessity, I think. So probably not the answer you were looking for, but it's certainly the way that I think about it and look at it.
I call it the divide, the real digital divide, beyond the digital anymore now. So there are more questions that came in.
I think maybe we can take one last one. What are the steps that regulations are taking and what's the ethics of it? I can take the regulatory question. It's just that everything is moving so fast. On the regulation side, we really don't know what's the shape of what's going to come. So from a builder perspective, we build keeping our customers very deeply in consideration. So our customers are at the center of what we are building. We are, we have all of these security and, have their data be secure, ensure that it is, there is no access to LLM. So we kind of bring in that security aspect, and we can talk about it definitely in one of the future fireside chats. But it's a space that it's evolving really fast. We are also keeping up with it and reading and kind of like making sure we are up to date. But like Greg said, it's an unstoppable force. You gotta accept it. You gotta learn. Everyone is learning along the way. The users, the businesses, the builders, the government, and everyone realizes that we just gotta get on the bandwagon and learn as we go. I think that's my takeaway on that question. Greg, anything you would like to add? Greg, Rose?
No, I just think that we have to be really careful. I think some people get in their mind this idea that like, oh, it's just been turned over to AI, and so that's it. Like we're pretty far away from saying that like audit is being done by like public company audits are just being done by AI in an unsupervised way. And like we've all just decided that that's okay, right? Like this is not what we're talking about today. And so really what we're talking about is just how does this tool help somebody do the job they already needed to do? And like there's still human oversight in all of this. So I think it's going to be, at some point there might be people lobbying for let's just turn audit over to AI, but I think we're still probably quite a ways off from that sort of regulatory change or anything like that.
Yeah, that's actually a very good grounding thing to say, because this augmentation is not automation completely, especially with the high degree of regulation and accuracy needed. But I think, we have amazing conversation. Thank you for the insight of Rosie and Greg. Appreciate the time and appreciate it for all the participants who joined and participated with the question. We hope that it's a fruitful discussion for your process and your input to your future of work and finance. And stay tuned for more in the series. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you, Greg. Thanks.
Yeah. Thanks,
Thank-
everybody. Thanks for having me. Appreciate you guys.